This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And today's subject is, I love it, it says, will self-limiting define your 2022? And I know something is going to define my 2022. And I hope it's not that I'm going to limit myself. So, Candace, what does this all mean?
Well, have you ever had an episode or a period where you felt like you weren't reaching your full potential?
The last couple weeks, yes.
And how did that make you feel?
Not good at all. As I shared before we came online, not to put the holidays down, but the month of December is so difficult for me because I want to keep working at what I consider my full speed. And yet my clients and my guests have every right to want to take time off for the holidays. But it slows me down to the point that I feel like I feel like a failure, and I know I'm not, but that's how I feel.
So when you say you feel like it, is that where do you feel it? How do you feel it? How does it show up?
I actually am totally drained from it, meaning that my stomach can ache, I can get increase my migraines. I get really moody. My poor family for the month of December. It was like I was on this roller coaster. If I had a show, I was like, hey, this is great. All my prep time and everything, this worked out. But if somebody sent me an email, even weeks in advance, saying, I can't do it on that day because of the holidays, I would just hit rock bottom. I'd be sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, like, am I ever going to be working again? And they weren't logical thoughts, obviously.
So that's kind of the point of the conversation today. And when you have those feelings, things tend to be black and white and more gloom and doom than optimism.
Right, exactly.
All right. And then when it comes time, do you set resolutions or goals or quarterly goals?
It's funny you should ask that because I hadn't been until about October. And that's when I decided that I wanted to see certain shows hit certain marks. And so I started putting a game plan together. And I did not take into consideration the holidays or anything else. And that was part of my feeling like a failure because my goals were really out of reach.
And if you had an overarching sentence or label for it, that shows up in your brain or in your heart or soul, when you have that thought, what is it?
When I have the thought that I'm failing at it.
Yeah. So is that the thought?
Yeah. The thought is, you're failing, and, what did you, is that voice again, that comes back. What did you do wrong? And I spent a good portion of the last 2 weeks, going through everything and identifying. The only thing I did wrong was I didn't anticipate, a lull because of the holiday. Just because I want to work doesn't mean everybody else wants to. And it makes sense.
Or in some instances, possibly they couldn't work for
right.
External reasons.
Yeah. Right.
But when we're feeling, we have that downward spiral feeling going on, it's hard to say, pull up.
Yeah.
Don't hit the ground.
Exactly.
All right. So how does that color your thinking going forward in terms of what you think is possible for you?
Well, so like I said, in the last 2 weeks, I sort of, took a back seat, started looking at things, started thinking about how people react to certain times of the year. And and especially when it comes to podcasting. And one of the things that I did is I went back and I looked at my calendar to see where many of my cancellations get affected. And looking at it, it was like, okay, now I can make a better game plan, because there's a time in June, there's a time at the end of August, and then there's like Thanksgiving through Christmas. And those are very specific based on different cycles in our society, whether it's the end of school, starting school, holidays, or whatever. And so knowing that as I plan forward, I can anticipate, even if I want to fill my schedule, that my schedule may not stay filled. And that will be okay based on the criteria that I've reviewed.
So you're setting different expectations about what's possible or what's in your control.
Right, exactly.
Okay. And then what does that do for you?
So it takes a lot of that stress out of it. It allows me, as somebody said yesterday, so now that you're doing this, are you putting in time for you? And I wasn't initially. But when I went to do some planning for June, I actually took out like 2 long weekends. So cutting off Friday and cutting off Monday as non-recording days, so that I can actually take a long weekend. And it probably won't affect any of my clients, and it probably won't affect, any guest shows that I would have.
And then how does that impact you?
It gives me that opportunity to look forward to something for me and actually plan something, or decide, hey, I don't want to plan anything. I just want it to be open time that I can do whatever at the spur of the moment. And that feels good, because I normally don't do that.
Carving out the time?
Right.
Or not scheduling the time?
Not scheduling the time. I mean, the only time I schedule out, so like this past year, the only time I truly scheduled out was when we went to Saratoga Springs for Thanksgiving, and any medical appointments that I've had. But other than that, I left myself open, that if somebody said, hey, I can do a show right now, and I had an opening, I filled it in. That's not what I'm doing going forward. So the other thing I did was I looked at what is a good timeline for me to work in. And I know that's early morning to just evening. And when I say evening, basically 5 o'clock is my cutoff. So I'm wide awake at 6 in the morning. I'm not going to record at 6, but I have my day starting from 8 to 5. And typically I am scheduling one day off a week in the middle of the week. So either a Wednesday or a Thursday, just to either catch up on things that I need to. And it's a good feeling to plan this way. And I just never have.
And what is your theory about why you never have?
So I had to write a bio for somebody today, and I realized that when I was writing the bio, I've never done this before because I always felt I had to prove myself. And by proving myself, I took on the mentality that you've talked about when you said, when you called yourself Candace on demand. It basically was Karen on demand, because if you're on demand, then people will want you. And if people will want you, then you'll be successful. And I realized that's a bunch of bullshit. I'm sorry. But it is. I mean, if they want me badly enough, we'll work it out. Okay. But being on demand has just totally worn me out. And it could be part of the reason that I've had some medical issues this past year, because I'm just, when my husband says, hey, I'm going to Sandusky today, do you want to take a ride with me? And it would be like, well, let me see how I can change my schedule around so I can be with you. And it's like, no, it's like, I don't want to be on demand. And I'm changing that.
And you can't afford to be.
No, physically, I know I can't afford to be anymore.
Yeah. So in the context of the topic today, the idea is that it's with the intentionality gurus, the whole orientation is exploring those hidden iceberg of factors that drive a lot of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And almost everything we've talked about is somehow pointing to that aspect. Lots of different theories and approaches and so on, depending on where a person is. And in some groups, they call it, how woo-woo you are. But the point is, there are a lot of different theories about it. So one book I've read is called The Great Leap by Dr. Gay Hendrickson. And he talks about that we have this inner thermostat, more or less, our sense of how far we can go in our own mind.
Right.
And he talks about a bunch of different things, but it's an upper limit problem that we might go beyond the limit, but then we'll have like a recoil, we'll come back from it, or we'll become sick, or we'll have irritability or something that kind of sabotages it. All right. And Martha Beck talked about a change back attack. Normally, in her context, she was talking about how others would say, well, I liked you the way you were before. And then you have this conflicted feelings about, well, should I do something to please that person, or is this something I want to pursue for myself? And Byron Katie talks about in the work, what she calls her approach, limiting beliefs. And then finally, in the positive intelligence work, they talk about it as being saboteurs. And the reason I really like the positive intelligence material is because, one, it's truly evidence-based, where all of the others are more anecdotal. I mean, it doesn't invalidate them. I mean, we know we tend to do better in the morning or versus the evening, depending on whether you're a morning person or a night owl, right? I don't think you need science to support that. But the reason I like the combination of these approaches is it's grabbing those thoughts we're having and looking at them in a methodical way, and then seeing how they're driving some of our thoughts. So the self-limiting phenomenon that occurs in humans, it just exists. There's all sorts of science to show it. And so with the positive intelligence, what they're talking about is in early childhood, even if we were in happy households, happy childhood, we have developed coping mechanisms to deal with, things that might have been unsettling or even threatening to a small child. And so this is really a silly story to tell, but my younger sister and I shared a bedroom for a long time. And she was a person who slept with her eyes slightly open. And it used to just, I was like 3 years older than her, but it would totally freak me out. And then she would do it to tease me. And then, so I get teased in the family about, she's looking at me again.
Yeah.
She's staring at me again. Like, not being a whiner necessarily, but, I was the recipient of a lot of teasing. So I learned certain ways of protecting myself from that teasing that under the positive intelligence approach, I've done to a fault as an adult. So we learn these coping mechanisms as a young child. We bring them with us as we age. Maybe we modified them a little bit, but we're not necessarily aware of them. So for me, it's insulating myself from teasing or situations where I might be foolish or, make a mistake. So doing a podcast for me is definitely very challenging. All right. But I've done it. It doesn't mean I don't have to wrestle with myself sometimes. So with you and how you describe things like being Karen on demand and so on, you had previously discussed how in your family, you would be the supportive one, the responsible one to make sure everybody was, taken care of and getting along. So how does that show up now?
So, it's interesting because over Thanksgiving, we went to New York. We were with my brother and his family. And my brother is very vocal about what he thinks of the social climate, to put it loosely. And he gets himself really, really upset, and he can get everybody around him upset if he starts sharing his thoughts. But I found that going and being with him in the past, I never could have said to him, you have to back off. Okay. Hey, brother, you're going to give yourself a heart attack. You got to find some good in the world. I would never say those things to him because he would have looked at me as, who do you think you are? However, I didn't feel that way this time. I wasn't going in to take over, but it was like, hey, I care, and I'm going to show you that I care. I'm going to tell you why. And his daughter recently said to me, I'm not exactly sure what you said to my dad. He hasn't changed 100%, obviously, but he is not yelling and screaming at the news all day long. And I said, well, I guess that's a good thing. And she said, yes, because he actually heard you. He didn't hear his wife. He didn't hear me. And, that made me realize that even though I have felt discounted by my family, being the youngest, obviously they do respect me. And that has given me the confidence that I can do more than I've ever done before.
And so what was the tipping point there in terms of what made the difference this time?
So before we got up there, my brother had sent out an email about something that had just happened in the news. And as I read it, I thought, do I want to be sitting at your Thanksgiving table if you're this angry? And I didn't know I knew I wasn't going to respond to something like that in an email, but it was like, I'm really worried about him. There's only so much each of us can do as an individual. And it's okay to speak your mind, but when you're speaking your mind 24/7, and especially at a TV screen, that doesn't do anything. So I decided that when I saw him, I was going to sort of wait for him to get in one of those modes, which he did almost immediately. And I said to him, you need to stop. And I said, I'm worried about you. And I think other people in this room are worried about you too. And it was almost like an intervention, but, not that extreme. And at first he kept saying, yeah. And then he goes, is it really that bad? And I said, well, you tell me, how do you feel, after you've had one of your rants? And he said, I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. I said, so is that what you want to happen? And nobody's ever asked him that. And he said, well, no. I said, then how can you prevent it? And I almost felt like I was taking on your role here on the podcast, because I wasn't telling him what to do, but I was asking him, how does it make you feel? What would happen if you didn't yell at the TV screen? And he said, I'm not sure I could do that. I said, well, could you try? Or could you turn the TV off? And, he started seeing at least what I'm seeing, even if he doesn't agree that his wife and daughter and grandkids see the same thing.
So what I heard, Karen, what I, kind of observing is that you demonstrated a lot of the tools that they talk about in positive intelligence. So,
Yes.
and what I wanted to bring the spotlight to is based on our prior conversations, you were the daughter who had to make everybody else comfortable.
Right.
Well, one, you're the only daughter, but two, you're the baby and so on. And that was your role, and to be compliant and so on. And you didn't feel you could speak up.
Right.
All right. And so now what I heard you saying today is you did speak up, but you did it in an empathic and open way, not making wrong, not, you versus him and that kind of thing. So it allowed him to try something on, and maybe even just a glimpse of what you might be suggesting to him can make all the difference. Then he can choose to step into that or not.
Right. And, and it's funny because I just did something similar with my husband the other day. One of the companies that my husband does IT work for, they can call him 100 times a day with assignments that make no sense. And I know it's stressful because I've listened to the conversations, but in the last couple of weeks, he's gotten almost mean and nasty when they call him because he doesn't understand them. They don't understand him. And he doesn't realize he's doing it. He's trying to try to drag information out of them. But the other day it got to the point that it really was affecting me. And I asked him almost in the same way, are you comfortable talking to them that way? And he goes, what way? When I explained it, he goes, am I doing that? And I said, well, I don't know. What do you think? And we had almost an hour conversation about it. And all of a sudden, after that conversation, he's acting differently when he takes our phone calls. And if he's not ready to take a phone call, he just lets it go to voicemail. And I thought, wow, that was a fast transformation. But again, I wasn't telling him, you're a bad guy, you're doing it wrong. But I could see that he gets himself so upset that he has no idea after a while what he's even said to them and what they've said to him.
Yeah, so in the positive intelligence material, they talk about, empathy and exploring. There are 5 what he calls SAGE skills, mental fitness skills, to overcome the saboteur ways we tend to think. And so we can bring that automatic way of being into the equation. So for me, I've mentioned it before, if I were to deal, generally it has to do with a bank. If I were to deal with a bank and they'll say, you don't understand how we do things here. For me, that's like if I were a toreador not that I would never do that. It's a red flag for me. And I would start to just escalate internally, all right? Not designed to have a good outcome. And I've been able to recognize that and moderate it. So what I heard so in the positive intelligence material, I wanted to make this point. They talk about, and I guess there's some science behind it, that if we go into a conversation with someone else whose behavior and or comments or whatever it happens to be isn't to our liking, but we go in with the mindset of they are at least 10% right. What occurs to you when you have that thought?
That I'm going to pay more attention to what they're saying.
Yeah, it makes it less black and white, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that for me was I could almost physically feel the mind shift when it occurred. And I don't always remember to do it, but I'm remembering more than not. But it takes some of the push-pull out of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some other exercises that people can go through in order to, really acquire that skill. So that's what I heard you doing, whether you were consciously aware of it or not. You were exploring things. You were also acknowledging your own needs, because it's not like we all have to just be taking care of everybody else's needs.
Right.
It has to be a, not a win-win per se, but something that it's not all one-sided. And then as we are doing those things, if we do them repetitively, we're actually changing the neural pathways that release the stress chemicals or the feel-good chemicals in our systems. So the more you do it, the better it's going to feel.
Well, and I will say that when I did this with my brother, I was more intentional than when I did it with my husband the other day. Because when I first started asking my husband the questions and stuff, I know my voice was probably a little bit louder than I would have liked it.
You're being emphatic.
But, right. But we were sharing the same office space. He was on the phone with them. I was trying to get something done. And I was feeling my blood pressure go up as his was. And it was like, this is not good for me. It's not good for him. And, if he doesn't want to work for this company, that's fine. And that's one of the things I actually brought into the equation. I said, it's your choice if you want to deal with them, but you have to decide how you want to deal with them so that they will want to continue to work with you. Because if somebody was yelling at me the way he was, I probably never would have called him for another assignment. But, sometimes we don't even realize some of the things that we're doing as we get upset. And that's what I was acknowledging, because, I'm sure I would have done exactly what he's been doing. So,
well, and that's where those saboteurs can kind of overtake us, because they're in there and we've reinforced them so well. We started them young, and on some level, we've just been doing them again and again and again. So our little neural pathways are, quite well defined.
right.
So first off is that skill we've always talked about from the get-go, which is just noticing when it happens. You don't have to fix it in the moment. You're just like, oh, okay, there I go again. That person uttered that fateful phrase to me. You don't understand how we do things here. And I can just notice, like, all right, I'm getting that little tense feeling in my neck, and my jaw is starting to clench. And I have some choice words on the tip of my tongue. And, I can then at least have a moment where I have that fork in the road where I can make a decision about whether I'm going to blast them or not. So I'll tell you, I was online with a tech company. I wasn't able to do something. And, they were very pleasant and so on, but it was that rote responses. Now, Miss Pollock, we know that you're probably getting, frustrated, And at that point, I wasn't that bad. But it was not responsive to the questions I was asking. And I was getting tenser and tenser and tenser. And so I reached that fork in the road. And the decision I made was, I said to her, I'm running out of coke. And I'm afraid I'm going to say some things I don't want to say, because I know it's not you. You just happen to be the person on the phone. And so what I want to do right now is hang up and chill out.
Right.
And then if I have a problem, well, ironically, the next day I was able to solve the problem on my own. All right. But I would have felt bad about myself, and it would have lingered. I would have had like a little residue of that, just as you were describing with your brother after the fact, if I had unloaded on her.
Yep, exactly. And, it's sometimes we know that we're out of cope, but even though we know it, we go there. And, one of the things we've talked about on a number of our shows that we've been doing is that it's the recognizing it and, making the changes so that we don't go there again. Because for most of us, it doesn't satisfy us. In fact, like you said, you feel horrible afterwards. And sometimes you can't even apologize because you can't get back to that same person.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So for purposes of the conversation today, we won't get into fixes and so on, but I do want to announce that in late spring, early summer, and it may not be precisely then, I do want to be rolling out a program that is specifically going to get into some of the strategies on how to fix things. It'll be limited seating and so on, just because of the nature of the material. But for those who might be interested in participating in that, they can just, continue to listen. And as I get closer to that date, I'll be announcing some more specifics and so on.
And I'm sure it will end up on your Facebook page at some point.
Oh, totally.
Well, that would be a great way to reach out to people. And, I have to say, and I've mentioned this again on many of my podcasts, that what I have learned through this podcast, when all of a sudden I see myself using some of those skills, I sometimes, I sometimes I'll find myself laughing like, oh, wow, I remembered how to do this. And it is refreshing when you realize that, there is another way of doing something other than maybe the way you've been doing it that hasn't been very satisfying. So,
so happy New Year, huh?
Yes, absolutely. So we will do this again in a couple of weeks. And again, you can go to newclevelandradio.net. If you have questions for Candace, you can email us at newclevelandradio@gmail.com. If you have questions about what kind of program she's going to be rolling out, she may not be ready to tell you yet, but as soon as it's ready, we'll get that information out to you.
It's a powerful program because I've gone through it, and I have to say it really was a game changer.
Wow, I look forward to hearing more about it. Everybody have a great day, a great weekend. If you're in Northeast Ohio, stay warm. It's supposed to get into the negative numbers. So, yeah, sorry, didn't mean to ruin your weekend. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.